I used to think I was just unlucky with people. Bad bosses, fake friends, and considerate strangers. Somehow, I always ended up on the wrong side of someone else's behavior. And for years, that explanation felt comfortable. Before we begin, please support MindShift Stories by subscribing, liking the video, and leaving a comment. Your support helps us continue sharing meaningful stories with the world. I work in a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago. Nothing glamorous. Open office space, glass conference rooms, polite emails with passive-aggressive undertones. The kind of place where people smile a lot but rarely say what they actually mean. I was good at my job. Reliable, organized, quiet. I met deadlines, stayed late when needed, and rarely complained out loud. At least, not directly. But inside, that was different. I remember thinking almost daily, why does this always happen to me? If a project went wrong, it was because someone didn't communicate clearly. If my idea wasn't chosen, it was because my manager had favorites. If a friend canceled plans, it meant I wasn't a priority. There was always a reason, and that reason was usually someone else. I didn't think of it as blaming, I thought of it as being realistic. Life felt like something happening to me. Other people's decisions shaped my mood. Their behavior dictated my confidence. Their tone determined my peace. It was subtle but constant. One Monday morning, my manager, Lisa, called me into her office. She had that careful look on her face, the kind people wear when they're about to say something constructive. "We need to talk about your collaboration feedback," she said. Feedback. I already felt defensive. Apparently, multiple teammates felt I was hard to approach. They said I seemed distant, sometimes dismissive in meetings, that I rarely asked for input but quietly disagreed later. I sat there nodding, but inside, I was irritated. Hard to approach? I'm just focused. Distant? Maybe they're too sensitive. Dismissive? I just don't tolerate nonsense. I left her office feeling misunderstood. And for the rest of the day, I mentally listed every time someone else had failed me. Every unclear instruction, every overlooked contribution, every inconsiderate act. It felt justified. That night, I replayed the meeting again in my head. Not because I agreed with it, but because something about it bothered me. It wasn't anger, it was discomfort. A small, quiet thought kept showing up. What if they're not entirely wrong? I pushed it away, but it came back the next morning when I walked into a team meeting. I decided, almost out of curiosity, to observe instead of react. When Mark presented an idea I didn't fully agree with, I noticed something. I crossed my arms. I avoided eye contact. I didn't ask a single question. I just waited for my turn to speak. When someone else talked over me briefly, I immediately shut down. I didn't clarify, I didn't re-enter the conversation. I mentally checked out. And then later, I complained about not being heard. It was subtle, but it was there. For the first time, I saw a pattern. I expected people to understand me without making myself clear. I assumed rejection before confirmation. I interpreted neutral behavior as personal. And then I blamed them for responding to the energy I was giving them. That realization didn't feel empowering. It felt unsettling. Because if I wasn't just a victim of circumstances, then I was part of the equation. A few days later, something small happened that became the turning point. A coworker, Jenna, asked if I could review her draft before a client presentation. I was busy. I almost said no. Normally, I would have declined, then later complained that no one supported me either. But I paused. Instead of reacting automatically, I asked myself a simple question. If I keep doing what I've been doing, will anything change? I agreed to review it. Not dramatically, not heroically, just calmly. As we sat together going through her draft, she said something unexpected. "I wasn't sure you'd say yes," she admitted. "You seemed kind of hard to read." Hard to read. Not rude, not mean, just closed. That hit differently. I realized people weren't rejecting me. They were responding to the walls I didn't know I had built. Over the next few weeks, I ran a quiet experiment. When I felt ignored, I clarified instead of withdrawing. When I disagreed, I asked questions instead of assuming incompetence. When someone seemed distant, I considered they might just be stressed, not disrespectful. It wasn't easy. My mind still wanted to protect itself by pointing outward. Blame is comfortable. It protects your ego. It keeps your identity intact. It says, "You're fine, the world is flawed." But responsibility feels heavier because it asks, what are you contributing? One afternoon, Lisa stopped by my desk. "I've noticed a shift," she said. "You seem more engaged." I nodded. I didn't explain what was happening internally, how every interaction felt like a small psychological test, how often I caught myself mid-judgment and adjusted. But something was changing. Not the office, not the people, me. And with that shift, something unexpected happened. I felt lighter. Not because everyone suddenly treated me perfectly, they didn't. Deadlines were still tight, miscommunications still happened, some personalities still clashed. But I wasn't carrying the constant story that I was wronged. That story was exhausting. It shaped how I saw everything. I used to walk into rooms already prepared to defend myself emotionally. I interpreted neutral expressions as disapproval, delays as disrespect, silence as exclusion. I had been filtering the world through quiet resentment. And once I noticed it, I couldn't unsee it. There was one specific moment that sealed it for me. A friend canceled dinner plans last minute. Old me would have thought, I'm not important to them. Instead, I asked, "Everything okay?" She called me and explained she was overwhelmed with family stuff. She sounded tired, not dismissive. I realized how many times I had assumed intention without evidence. Assumptions had shaped my emotional reality more than facts. And I had blamed people for reactions to situations I partly created. This wasn't about guilt. It wasn't about self-blame. It was about ownership. There's a psychological comfort in believing your struggles are entirely caused by others. It protects you from self-examination, but it also removes your power. The day I stopped blaming others wasn't dramatic. There was no apology tour, no public declaration. It was quiet. It happened the moment I accepted that my perception wasn't neutral. It was shaped by past disappointments, insecurities, unspoken expectations. I had been reacting to my interpretations, not always to reality. That awareness changed how I moved through the world. I started listening more carefully, asking instead of assuming, clarifying instead of retreating. And interestingly, people responded differently. Not perfectly, but differently. Conversations felt less tense. I felt less defensive. I wasn't scanning for hidden disrespect. I was simply present. The biggest shift wasn't external success. It was internal peace. I didn't feel attacked by small inconveniences anymore. I didn't feel personally diminished by every disagreement because I wasn't keeping score. Blame creates distance. Responsibility creates connection. That's the hidden truth I had missed. When you blame, you separate yourself from the situation. You position yourself as powerless, and powerlessness breeds frustration. But when you take responsibility, even partially, you regain influence. You can't control other people's behavior. That part is real. But you can control your response, your interpretation, your communication. And that control is quieter than blame, but stronger. Sometimes I still catch myself slipping. It's easy to fall back into old patterns. If someone interrupts me, there's still a flash of irritation. If someone forgets something important, I still feel that initial sting. But now there's a pause, a small space between reaction and assumption. And in that space, I ask myself, what else could this mean? That question alone has changed my relationships. I used to think maturity meant being right, being aware of other people's flaws, protecting yourself from being taken advantage of. Now I think it's something simpler. It's being honest about your own contribution. The day I stopped blaming others, nothing around me changed instantly, but my experience of everything did. And sometimes I wonder how many of us are walking around carrying invisible stories about how the world mistreats us. How many conflicts are fueled by interpretations rather than intentions? How many relationships feel strained not because of what happened, but because of what we decided it meant? I'm not saying everyone is innocent. People make mistakes. Some people are careless, some are selfish. But not every discomfort is injustice. Sometimes it's perspective. Sometimes it's unspoken expectation. Sometimes it's our own fear of not being valued, projecting itself outward. If you had met me a year ago, I would have told you I was surrounded by difficult people. Today, I see something different. I see normal humans, distracted, stressed, and perfect, just like me. And that realization didn't make me weaker, it made me calmer. The day I stopped blaming others wasn't about excusing behavior. It was about reclaiming responsibility for my own. And once I did that, I stopped waiting for people to change before I could feel okay. Maybe that's the real shift. Not changing the world, but changing the lens through which you see it. And sometimes I still ask myself, quietly, how many things in my life are heavier than they need to be simply because of the story I'm telling myself?